megalithic structures, biblical stories, prehistoric art, and cave paintings point to the existence of non-terrestrial life. And with advanced technology, new recordings, and the internet, more evidence points to their continued presence today. Why then do we, the public, know so little? Why has the media ignored credible reports from eyewitnesses and ufologists? And why have world governments suppressed these facts from their citizens? Hi, I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and this is Just Energy. Thank you all for tuning into this episode. Just Energy is brought to you by SoulHealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer. In this episode, we will be speaking with A.R. Roberts about his new book, UFOs, What is the Government Really Covering Up? Alan takes a step back and offers an in-depth survey of the UFO phenomena as a whole. Using familiar case studies of alien encounters as examples, he casts a wide net that shows a clear pattern of extraterrestrial visitation and the ensuing cover-up by U.S. and world governments. A.R. Roberts first spotted a UFO when he was a volunteer in the Ground Observatory Corps during the Cold War in 1954. The GOC scanned the skies when on duty Friday night, reporting all aircraft flying over the area to the Air Force Filter Center. Now Roberts has compiled his discoveries and conjectures from 60 years of studying UFOs. And again, his book is UFOs, What's the Government Really Covering Up? So please welcome A.R. Roberts. Hey, Alan, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Dr. Rita.
Well, I'm glad to have you back on the show and talking about your new book, UFOs, What is the Government Really Covering Up? And the best part was, I have me on the back. That makes it just be extra super special.
Oh, you are. Thank you for the endorsement. I really appreciate that.
Well, you are so welcome. I mean, I think that you do good research and good work, and so it's always nice to support, fellow like-minded thinkers.
Okay.
So why write a book about UFOs and the government?
Well, from the first book I had, From Atom to Omega, An Anatomy of UFO Phenomena, I covered a whole bunch of issues which dealt with just about everything, almost everything associated with UFOs. But in this one, I tried to focus on what it is the government is covering up and why they're covering it up, and there's many issues involved with that. It's a very, what I call a very complex jigsaw puzzle. And there's many pieces that I believe people have missed because they haven't recognized them as even being a part of the puzzle. And a lot of that goes into the biblical era. There's the issues involving the cover-up. Well, first of all, you got the government is maintaining controversy through disinformation and misinformation. And you've got the biblical issues. Then you've got the alien hybrid breeding program.
And we're gonna get into all of that as we move forward. But I think we both agree that there's evidence of extraterrestrial encounters in our remote past. I think we both agree with that. But based on your research, why do you think modern encounters, or do you think modern encounters are the same group, or are there the same groups that have been here since antiquity?
Well, there's, from what we've learned from the alien abductees, they've encountered different species of aliens, apparently. Of course, this is all hypothetical because there's no way to prove it. But I think the ones that were involved in ancient history, especially back in the biblical era, were what we today might consider the Nordics or the human-looking aliens. There's so much information in the Bible suggesting this, and they have there's an agenda, and they have a deadline to meet. Now, this may sound crazy, but I did 23 years of research for my first book, and a lot of it didn't make sense until I started to connect all the dots to find out why this happened. It seems like it's related to this and this, and after putting all the dots together, this whole concept of an agenda came up, that they're expediting human evolution on a social, moral, and a technological level, and that they have a deadline to meet. And in the beginning of the project, which I believe started maybe 6,000 years ago, it probably started long before then, but I think when you look at the Bible, it seems to be a metaphorical description of what they have been doing, say, for the past 6,000 years. Now, whether the stories in the Bible are time-wise are accurate, or even if some of these stories may be created to explain what they're doing, when you put all these things together and tie up all the loose ends, it seems to be that they started out with a project that they described as starting at 6,000 years ago. It probably started long before then, but they've condensed it into a 6,000 year, or at least a 4,000 year period, where in the biblical era, from around 4,004 to 4,000 BC up until the ascension of Christ. And then you've got all these stories going into the Bible, and I think religion has distorted a lot of the meanings, because they interpreted these scriptures in a theological perspective, where I've looked at it in a very logical perspective, and I've tried to explain there's two sides to every story at least, and I'm saying this is just another side to the story from the logical perspective. And I'm not claiming any of it's a fact of life. I'm just saying that this is what the evidence tells me or suggests to me. And then again, I state throughout the book, evidence is evidence. It does not necessarily constitute proof. So I'm kind of, maybe you want to call me an agnostic in the middle there somewhere on all these ideas.
Well, I think it's honest. I mean, it's like, this is what it says to me. There's so much that people put out as truth and reality when it's just their thought and their conclusion to collecting data. So I appreciate people that say, well, this is my interpretation of this data set. I appreciate that from people, personally.
Well, that's very, very true. Now, there's also what appears to be a government indoctrination to psychologically prepare the human race for eventual disclosure. Now, this is probably not going to happen in our lifetime, but if they come out and admitted exactly what they know, people today are not psychologically or mentally prepared to deal with it, because it has a lot to do with what went on during the biblical era. And to admit that now, people are not ready to hear something like that, if it's true. But if they did come out with this information, it would blow religions out of the water all over the world.
But let's talk about the whole religious notion, because that was one of the questions I had written down. Mm-hmm. Was, and we'll go back and talk about government cover-up in a little bit. But right. I feel like there has been, and I'm going to say a religious cover-up, because when you step outside of faiths that are, and I'm going to say Abrahamic, that have a monotheistic base, that follow the tenets of the Bible or perhaps the Quran, they all believe in sky gods and, extraterrestrials. And so it seems like this cover-up, from a churchy point of view, is just in the Western world, and it's us, like exactly. It was all taken out of our brain, because you can't have multiple gods because there's only one.
Yeah, exactly. And when you look at all these other civilizations around the world, I mean, the Incas, the Mayans, the Hindus, I mean, they're all basically telling the same stories what you find in the Judeo-Christian Bible. A god or gods came down from the heavens and created the human race, and it sounds like all these gods that they're talking about, they all have different names. But then I asked the question: is it if this is true, then these gods were creating human beings all over the world in different countries and different continents. But is it really many gods creating these human beings, or is it really one God that's known by different names in different countries doing the same thing in all over the world? In other words, is there more than one God, Garden of Eden, more than one Adam and Eve? And I mean, you've got so many different species of humankind. I mean, you got short people, tall people, white, black, you know, and different facial features. I mean, with and without facial hair. You've got blonde-haired, tall beings. You got, I mean, such a variety, and it's hard to believe that such a variety can be traced back to Adam and Eve, say 4,000, 6,000 years ago. I mean, it's usually, you know, evolution. Every species on Earth has evolved along the way to different stages of evolution, but it just seems like all these different versions of humanity that we have, I just can't see them coming about in a matter of 6,000 years. I mean, this progression and evolution that takes place usually takes millions of years, and it just seems like there's too many species of mankind on Earth right now that could have developed in just 6,000 years. So maybe these gods were all over the world, or one god was going all over the world, created these human beings. You know? So
and I agree. You know, and if it was multiple gods, you know, and multiple groups that were here creating humanity,
right?
Then why would we all be human? You know, why not make a dog with opposable thumbs that can play poker at a card table in, you know, Southeast Asia? I mean,
Right.
you know, why is there that convention of this is what humans look like?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to recognize the technological implications of what Ezekiel described of the metallic craft carrying 5 men that came down and landed in front of him. I mean, to me, that right there is probably one of the strongest points alluding to extraterrestrial intelligence coming down to Earth and interacting with human beings. And, you know, there's so much evidence in the Bible with the gods and the angels in the Bible were extraterrestrials. And then when you look at I have suggested in the book there that some of the major characters in the Bible were hybrid humans. When you go back to Adam and
Such
Eve,
as,
for example, when they created Eve, it said, I think it was Genesis 3:24, or I forgot the passage exactly, but it says, Lord God put Adam into a deep sleep, and then he removed one of his ribs, allegedly one of his ribs, which he needed to create Eve. And then it says he closed up the place with flesh. Now, when you put aside the religious implications and the miraculous innuendos that go along with the story, to me, it's describing a technology that takes place today in every hospital. Putting Adam to sleep suggests that, into a deep sleep, suggests to me that he was anesthetized, so an operation could be performed. Closing up the flesh, place with flesh, is describing the closing of an incision, what every surgeon does after an operation. And you got so much of this in the Bible. It's just, you know, when you look at it from a logical perspective, but then when you realize the Bible stories were passed down for thousands of years, most of them were, in ancient Hebrew or Aramaic, and they underwent many changes over this time. how much spin was put on these stories over the centuries by the people doing the retelling, generation after generation. When you get into the modern area, I think somewhere along the way they started to include a lot of miraculous and religious interpretations into it, which, of course, the religion has just bought right into that, and that's where we are today. So I think there's, if you look at it from a logical perspective, it's, it's just wondering. And I cite one of the things that I did in my younger years when I was in my 20s. We used to, a bunch of us used to get together, maybe 25, 30 people at a party. One of the games we played was what we call the story game. And 10 people volunteered to play the game, and we sent 9 of them into a room out of earshot. And we had a story prepared ahead of time that we told the remaining person. Now, he turned around and told that to the next person brought into the room, who then turned around and repeated to the next person, and so on down the line. By the time it got down to the 10th person, I mean, the story was completely different. Sometimes it was very hysterical, some of the changes that were made. But when you compare that to, this was done within a half hour, 30 minutes tops. And what does that say about the biblical stories that have been passed down for thousands of years? How much being retold and retold. Like I say, how much spin was put on them by the people doing the retelling. So, what we got today, we don't know how accurate of an interpretation that it really is.
I took a class and we did a similar exercise, except half the room just passed the story around, and the other half of the room had a piece of paper that had the first letter of each word written down on the paper. And so the side that had the first letter of each word written down on the paper actually got the sentence perfectly correct, minus I think one word where it was like a the, and they changed it to these or something like that. And it was remarkable just by having that mnemonic, going along with the story, that it was able to make it through 15 people and come out the other side relatively unaltered.
It's amazing.
But
you've got these evolutionary stages in language as it changed over the years. And then some of the words had different meanings when you can translate it from one language to another. So all these little things that you got to take into consideration when you read the Bible.
There are some people that suggest that the change from a pantheon of gods into a monotheistic religious tradition occurred because an individual extraterrestrial came to the Jewish people and said, "You're my people and I'm your God, and don't have these other gods before me." And so do you think that is a fair and accurate statement? And that's how this whole monotheistic system came into place?
I sure do. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. In fact, these other ancient civilizations where they had all these gods, the Roman gods actually copied the Greek gods. They just gave them different names, but basically they were the same gods. And when you look at many of these other Western religions, it still boils down to the same thing. And I think, these gods apparently gave these people much knowledge in mathematics and astronomy and a whole gamut of knowledge. But somewhere along the line, it seems that they left because you don't hear about them anymore. But in Eastern religion and Judeo-Christian religion, it seems like they kind of, or if it was just one deity involved there, it seems like he kind of focused on the Hebrews, and he created a new race through them. And I go into a little bit of detail on that in the book there. But and when you look at the chronology of events that occurred after from Abraham, there was a whole series of events suggesting that this being that we call the Lord had a plan to create a new race, which he revealed to Abraham 500 years in advance. And that, well, I say 500 years in advance, that was from the time that he delivered the Israelites to their promised land. But part of that plan, it was revealed to him, started earlier when, with Isaac, with his descendants. He said he was going to give Isaac's descendants their own land, which he did through Joseph, Jacob's son Joseph, when his brothers sold him to the merchants, brought him to Egypt, and all these circumstances that where he ended up as the governor of Egypt, or the vizier, or whichever you want to call it. And then it was his responsibility that brought his family to Egypt, and by order of the Pharaoh, they were given the land of Goshen, where they could raise their animals, grow their crops, and live comfortably. And they were just a small tribe at that point. But the first 100 years went by pretty good, but the next 400 years after Joseph died and the Pharaoh died, the later rulers of Egypt didn't know anything about them in the past, and they began to use them for slave labor. And this was part of the plan that was revealed to Abraham. He said, but first they will be enslaved in another land for 400 years. And then I will bring them to their promised land. But then there's the indoctrination period, the 40 years in the desert. That's the part that he didn't reveal. Because if these people had known when they were freed from Egypt that they were going to spend 40 years in the desert, they never would have followed Moses.
Well, and the part of that story that I find very interesting is that all of the people that had actually left Egypt had died prior to moving into the promised land. So basically, you have a whole new generation that are indoctrinated into this belief system and into this land and culture of laws and rules and regulations that were potentially different, because we don't really know, than what they had earlier.
Right, and there's so many laws. When you look at all the laws and rules that they were supposed to follow, that they were ordered to follow, there was so much of that it would take more than a couple of months or a couple of weeks to indoctrinate these people, to acclimate to these changes. They had to let go of the old style of justice, vengeance, and killing as the old way of settling their differences, and they had to adapt to a whole new standard, whole new regime of ethical and moral standards to live by, and that took a generation for that to sink in before they were allowed to go into their promised land. And it was the elders, they had a lot of influence on the younger generation, not so much like they do today. They don't have it like they did back then. And the elders were pretty much set in their ways, and I think they knew that a lot of them would be unable to adapt to these changes. There are probably some exceptions, but the majority would not be able to go along with all of this. And I think that rather than destroy them, I mean, they didn't do anything wrong. So this 40-year indoctrination gave them a chance to live out their lives before they were brought. Everybody was brought to the promised land. So there's very few of the elders left when they reached the promised land. It was those who were producing children, and those who were producing children that were the focal point of these changes. And once they made these changes, once they were brought into their promised land, they were better prepared to accept the wiser teachings of Christ, and I think they were more readily adaptable to that. They were, with all this, the laws and changes that they went through, they accepted his teachings a lot more than they would have had they not gone through this indoctrination. But
well, let's change subjects here, because we're supposed to be talking about government cover-ups.
All right.
And so let's kind of fast forward in time, a few thousand years. Because I think that, the church definitely, or religion played a role in one level of cover up of the extraterrestrial presence, the sky gods. But what about in today's government? When did things change? When was the era of denial imposed regarding our knowledge of extraterrestrials? That's A.R. Roberts. His book is UFOs. What is the government really covering up? And thank you for watching this portion of our interview with AR. If you're enjoying today's program, please click on the button below and subscribe to our channel. If you want to hear this interview in its entirety, become a Just Energy Radio insider at justenergyradio.com and access full shows commercial-free and gain access to our over 9 years of show archives. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So until next time, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy. Be blessed.